2 billion. That's how many popsicles are sold every single year. If you line them up end to end, they'd circle the Earth more than twice. The popsicle is so deeply woven into the American experience that the 8th Air Force chose it as a symbol of American life during World War II. It's the taste of summer, the reward after a long day, the treat that transcends generations. But here's what you probably don't know. The man who invented this $2 billion a year industry died with almost nothing. And the story of how that happened begins with a 11-year-old kid, a cold night, and a glass of soda left on a porch. This is the sweet and bitter story of Frank Epperson. The year was 1905. Theodore Roosevelt was president. The automobile was still a novelty. And in the San Francisco Bay Area, an 11-year-old kid named Francis William Epperson, Frank to everyone who knew him, was about to make a discovery that would change American summers forever. One evening, young Frank was on his back porch, doing what kids in 1905 did for fun, mixing up a homemade soda. He combined powdered soda flavoring with water, stirring it with a wooden stick. But then his mother called him inside for a chore, or maybe he just got distracted by something more interesting. Whatever the reason, Frank left that glass of sweetened water sitting on the porch overnight, and that night, temperatures dropped. By morning, Frank's drink had transformed. The liquid had frozen solid around the wooden stirring stick, creating something entirely new, a frozen treat with a built-in handle. Curious, Frank ran the glass under warm water, pulled out the frozen soda by its stick, and tasted it. It was delicious. Now, here's where we need to pause, because this origin story, as charming as it is, has some problems. The lowest recorded temperature in San Francisco in 1905 was 39 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold, but not cold enough to freeze a sugary drink solid overnight. In fact, from the year Frank was born in 1894 to the year he patented the Popsicle in 1924, the temperature in San Francisco dropped to freezing exactly once. In 1922, when Frank was already a 28-year-old adult living in Oakland. Oakland, on the other hand, did see freezing temperatures several times during those years. And we know the Epperson family moved from San Francisco to Oakland sometime around 1907. So what really happened? The most likely explanation is that Frank, retelling his famous story decades later as a 77-year-old retiree, simply compressed and romanticized the details. Maybe he was 14 instead of 11. Maybe it happened in Oakland, not San Francisco. Maybe it was 1908 or 1910, not 1905. But the essential truth, that a Bay Area kid accidentally discovered the concept of frozen soda on a stick, has become the official legend, printed on millions of Popsicle boxes to this day. And besides, Frank wasn't the only one selling frozen treats on sticks. As early as 1872, two men named Ross and Robbins were selling something called the Hokey Pokey, a frozen fruit confection on a stick. The ice cream industry was experimenting with similar ideas around the same time. Frank's genius wasn't necessarily in being first. It was in being the one who finally made it work and the one who gave it a name. Here's the part of the story that often gets glossed over. After that cold night, Frank Epperson didn't do much of anything with his accidental invention. For 17 years. Think about what happened during those 17 years. World War I came and went. The Spanish flu killed millions. Women gained the right to vote. The entire world transformed. And Frank grew up. He became a realtor with the Realty Syndicate Company in Oakland. He got married to a woman named Mary Frances Williams. They started having children. Eventually, they would have 10 kids and stay married for 70 years, but Frank never forgot that frozen treat. He kept making them for his friends as a teenager, for his own children as a father. He called them Popsicles, a combination of his name and icicle. His kids, though, had a different name for them. Popsicle. That's what Frank's children called his frozen treats. Popsicle, Dad's icy thing. It was a term of endearment, a family nickname for a family recipe. And eventually, that nickname would become one of the most recognizable brand names in American history. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. In 1922, Frank Epperson finally decided to take his Popsicles public. The venue he chose was Neptune Beach, a sprawling amusement park on the shore of San Francisco Bay in Alameda, California. Nicknamed The Coney Island of the West, Neptune Beach was the place to be in the pre-Depression Bay Area. The park had opened in 1917 and featured everything a pleasure seeker could want: roller coasters with views of the bay, an Olympic-sized swimming pool where future Tarzan actor Johnny Weissmuller and fitness pioneer Jack LaLanne performed exhibitions, baseball games, prize fights, beauty contests, and dance halls. Admission was a dime. Tens of thousands of visitors arrived by train and ferry from San Francisco every summer weekend. Frank's first public debut was at a fireman's ball held at Neptune Beach. In a 1971 interview with the San Francisco Chronicle, the then 77-year-old Epperson recalled the evening he and his wife Mary wandered around the hall, munching on Popsicles. Eventually, a man approached him. "Those must be awfully good," the man said. "I've seen you eat half a dozen." The man's date tried one. She declared it delicious. The response was, according to reports, a sensation. Encouraged by the reaction at the fireman's ball, Frank began selling Popsicles at Neptune Beach proper in 1923. The results exceeded anything he could have imagined. On peak days, Frank sold as many as 8,000 Popsicles. 8,000 frozen treats, each one made by hand, each one purchased for a nickel, each one consumed by a delighted customer on a hot California afternoon. He sold them in 7 original flavors: fruity, refreshing, perfect for a summer day at the beach. Neptune Beach also saw the debut of another summer staple, the snow cone, which came in 8 flavors and cost 5 cents. The Kewpie doll made its first appearance there too, and some historians say so did the concept of synchronized swimming demonstrations. But it was the Popsicle that captured the public's imagination. Frank Epperson, the Oakland realtor, had a genuine hit on his hands. On June 11, 1924, Frank Epperson filed for a patent. His application described the Popsicle, though he was still calling it the Popsicle, as a frozen confection of attractive appearance, which can be conveniently consumed without contamination by contact with the hand and without the need for a plate, spoon, fork, or other implement. The patent was remarkably detailed. It included recommendations for the best types of wood to use for the stick: wood base, birch, or poplar. It specified the ideal shape and proportions. It was, in essence, a blueprint for the perfect ice pop. On August 19, 1924, Frank received U.S. patent hash 1505592 for his frozen confectionery. He was 30 years old. He had a patent, a proven product, and thousands of satisfied customers. Somewhere along the way, either pressured by poor sales under the clunky Popsicle name or convinced by his children's nickname, Frank officially changed the name to Popsicle. The stage was set for success, but Frank Epperson made a critical error, one he would regret for the rest of his life. He patented the product. He patented the process, but he never trademarked the name. Popsicle was not a good name, Epperson admitted decades later. "I should have protected the name, Popsicle." Instead, the name Popsicle was trademarked by the Popsicle Corporation, a separate company that was marketing Frank's treat across the country as a frozen lollipop or a drink on a stick. Frank set up a royalty arrangement with the Popsicle Corporation. He was making money. He had partners. Things seemed to be going well. The roaring 20s were roaring. The future looked bright. And then came 1929. The stock market crash of October 1929 devastated millions of Americans. Frank Epperson was one of them. His real estate business collapsed. His investments evaporated. The royalty arrangement with the Popsicle Corporation wasn't enough to keep him afloat. Frank was, in his own words, flat. With no other options, Frank Epperson sold his patent rights to the Joe Low Company of New York. The exact amount he received varies in different accounts. Some sources say around $50,000, which would be roughly $900,000 in today's money. Not nothing, certainly, but for a product that would go on to generate billions, a pittance. Years later, in an interview, Frank reflected on the decision. "I was flat and had to liquidate all my assets. I haven't been the same since." The Joe Low Company didn't just buy Frank's patent. They built an empire. Low set up a subsidiary called Popsicle Industries and began manufacturing the frozen treats at scale. They expanded distribution nationwide, partnering with entertainment venues like Brooklyn's Coney Island. The original Coney Island, that Neptune Beach had tried to emulate. And then came a stroke of marketing genius. As the Great Depression deepened and families struggled to stretch every dollar, Popsicle Industries introduced the Double Pop, a two-stick version that could be split in half, allowing two children to share a single treat for just 5 cents. It was brilliant, affordable, democratic. The Double Pop became an icon of Depression-era ingenuity, a symbol of making do with less while still enjoying life's small pleasures. But Popsicle Industries didn't have the frozen treat market to themselves. In 1920, a man named Harry Burt had invented the Good Humor Bar, chocolate-covered ice cream on a stick. Burt's company pioneered the ice cream truck, sending uniformed salesmen through suburban neighborhoods with bells ringing. 6 months after Frank received his Popsicle patent in 1924, Good Humor sued the Popsicle Corporation. The lawsuit sparked what historians have called the Frozen Sucker War, a years-long legal battle over who had the right to sell what on a stick. By October 1925, the parties settled out of court. The compromise essentially divided the market. Popsicle could sell water-based treats, flavored ice, sherbet, frozen juice. Good Humor would sell dairy-based products, ice cream, frozen custard. Popsicle got the cylinder shape. Good Humor got the rectangle, but the truce didn't last. In 1931, Popsicle tested the agreement by introducing a milk popsicle with 48% butter fat. Good Humor sued again. The case went to federal court in Delaware. The judge ruled for Good Humor. Popsicle was ordered to stick to water ice. The rivalry would continue for decades, until 1989, when Unilever bought both companies and merged them under the Good Humor Breyers division. The Frozen Sucker War was finally over. Meanwhile, the Popsicle brand was becoming a cultural phenomenon. On April 5, 1939, listeners tuning into the popular radio program Buck Rogers in the 25th Century heard something new. A cheerful kid named Popsicle Pete. Pete had supposedly won the typical American boy contest. He told listeners they could win prizes by saving wrappers from Popsicles, Fudgesicles, and Creamsicles and mailing them in. "Hello everybody, I sure am glad to meet ya," Pete announced in that first broadcast. And boy, am I glad I was picked to be the typical American boy. During the 1940s, cartoonist Woody Gelman and his partner Ben Solomon created Popsicle Pete comic strips that appeared in newspapers, on packaging, and in activity books. Pete became a fixture of American childhood, a red-haired kid who embodied the simple joys of summer. Pete would appear in Popsicle advertising for the next 50 years, finally retiring in 1989 when Good Humor acquired the brand. During World War II, the Popsicle took on an unexpected significance. The 8th Air Force, the legendary Mighty 8th that flew bombing raids over Nazi-occupied Europe, chose the Popsicle as a symbol of American life. The frozen treat represented everything the soldiers were fighting for: home, summer, childhood, innocence. Back home, Popsicles were everywhere, a 5-cent reminder that even in the darkest times, simple pleasures endured. As for Neptune Beach, the place where Frank Epperson first introduced his Popsicles to the public, the Great Depression hit it hard. In 1938, the park's operators owed $180,000 to bondholders. Attendance had declined as people struggled to afford even a dime admission. In April 1939, bondholders foreclosed. The park limped through one final season before closing forever. On March 25, 1940, everything was auctioned off. "Here is your chance to buy a roller coaster cheap," the Oakland Tribune announced, "or perhaps you might like a scenic train, some trick mirrors, and a nice set of 1,000 beer glasses." The beautiful hand-carved carousel was sold to San Francisco's Playland at the beach. The roller coaster, the Ferris wheel, the rides that had delighted hundreds of thousands, all sold for pennies on the dollar. Today, the site is known as Crab Cove. Neptune Beach exists only as a mural in a shopping center, and in the memories of those who remember when the Coney Island of the West was the place to be. And Frank Epperson? He continued working in real estate in Oakland until his retirement in 1968, when he and Mary moved to Fremont. They had raised 10 children together. In 1971, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Popsicles' introduction at Neptune Beach. A photographer captured Frank, now 77 years old, sharing a popsicle with his 5-year-old granddaughter Nancy. He still gave interviews occasionally. He still told the story of the cold night and the forgotten glass of soda, and he still carried the regret. "I should have protected the name," he admitted. Popsicle. Frank Epperson died on October 22, 1983 at the age of 89. His obituary ran in the New York Times. Frank W. Epperson, who invented the popsicle on an extraordinarily cold night in San Francisco in 1905, died last week. Today, the popsicle is one of the most successful frozen treats in history. Under Unilever's ownership, the brand has expanded far beyond Frank's original 7 fruit flavors. There are firecrackers in red, white, and blue. SpongeBob SquarePants Pops. Slow melt technology. Sugar-free options, limited editions, and seasonal releases. 2 billion are sold every year. Cherry has overtaken orange as the most popular flavor. The word popsicle has become so generic that Unilever has had to defend its trademark aggressively, even threatening legal action against small artisan ice pop makers for using the term on their blogs. Frank Epperson is buried in Oakland's Mountain View Cemetery. He's featured on a tour celebrating local food luminaries, alongside chocolate mogul Domingo Ghirardelli and Mai Tai inventor Victor, Trader Vic Bergeron. Frank Epperson wasn't a rich man when he died. By one estimate, his net worth at the time of his death was modest, nothing compared to the billions his invention generated for others. But perhaps there's another way to measure wealth. 6 generations of childhoods were made sweeter by Frank Epperson's accidental discovery. Millions of summer days were made more bearable. Countless memories were created around that simple pleasure, frozen sweetness on a stick, dripping down your chin on a hot afternoon. His story has been told in children's books, on company websites, even in Christian self-help books as an example of trusting in God's plan. It's a story that endures because it speaks to something universal: the magic of childhood discovery, the bittersweet reality of business, and the way a simple accident can change the world. What can we learn from Frank Epperson? Maybe it's the importance of protecting your intellectual property, not just the product, but the name. Frank patented the invention, but failed to trademark what would become one of the most valuable brand names in American food history. Maybe it's a lesson about timing, about not waiting 17 years to act on a good idea. The world is full of inventors who were too early or too late. Frank was almost too late. Or maybe it's a reminder that success and failure are often separated by forces beyond our control. Frank couldn't have predicted the 1929 crash. He couldn't have known that selling his patent would haunt him for the rest of his life. But perhaps the most important lesson is simpler than that. Sometimes the best things in life come from accidents, from mistakes, from a glass of soda left on a porch on a cold night by a distracted 11-year-old kid. The next time you unwrap a popsicle on a hot summer day, think about Frank Epperson. Think about a boy on a porch in the Bay Area, tasting something frozen and wonderful for the first time. Think about a man selling his creation at a fireman's ball, watching strangers fall in love with his treat. Think about a father whose children gave his invention its name. And think about an old man in Fremont, California, sharing a popsicle with his granddaughter, carrying the sweet taste of success and the bitter aftertaste of what might have been. "I haven't been the same since," he said. "But thanks to that one cold night, neither has America."